Okay, I am live. So this is, of course, the Animation Truman Show, where you are the live witness to the creation of an actually commercially available cartoon. When do you ever get that? When do you ever get that? When's the last time the good folks at Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon or your favorite Japanese anime studio just turned on the cameras and said, you know what? Just look over our shoulder and see what we're doing. There's no secrets here. Well, there is evolution though, because I actually came to an interesting conclusion about the palettes and the vertex paint mode in Blender, but we'll get to that. So this is just a quick recap of what's kind of been going on. Let's actually go back a little bit more. So Melchizedek's in a tricky spot because he's managed to ingratiate himself into the tavern, ostensibly to have a job, to maybe make some money or maybe get some food for the guys, for Tia and Luca and the monkey. And unfortunately, he immediately gets assigned to table 7, which is the very table that Vespar and Tobias are sitting at. That's not good. Okay, so, excuse me. Sorry to cough in your ear there, friends. Okay, so let's look at the script. What is actually going on here? Okay, so Tobias is like, well, drinks to start then. Hmm? And Vespar jumps in right after that and says, today? As if to be, like, get on it, pal. And then the tavern keeper shows up, says, so the pacing of this is fairly tight. Good day, Tobias. Your Highness, don't be too hard on this one. He only just started today. Just started? Okay, because Mel definitely gave Tobias the impression that he was new. I mean, I'm sorry, the opposite. You know me, dyslexic, reverse everything. Gave Tobias the impression that he had been there for a long time. He even said, I think of this tavern as my second home. Okay, so this is the shot we're working on. Basically, there is a learning, it's a learning curve, and I have to say that from my vantage point, the okay, so a few weeks ago, I said, look, if I use the vertex color material for paint, for when I'm filling in the colors on the characters, if I use this material in vertex paint mode, then I have the ability to create a palette for each character. Okay, so I've been doing that for several weeks, and I just want to say that starting today, I've come to the conclusion that this is not a win. I thought it was. I genuinely thought it was, and I absolutely have learned that it is not. Here's why. Um, parenthetically, I cannot tell you how many millions of times I have been trying to move in a fluid, forward fashion and had to stop in my tracks because I forgot to switch modes. Okay? Obviously, these are all things you can learn. But what I realized is, okay, when it's time to do ink and paint, I have to switch to the vertex color material, switch to vertex paint mode, pull up the appropriate palette, do my work, and then switch back out of all of the above. Switch back out. Okay, so how many steps is that? It's not that we're aggregating the steps and saying, if there's 5 steps, all of a sudden that adds up too much and it's a problem. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, in practice, what I found is there are so many of these sort of really frenetic stops and starts that throw you off your creative game that I'm thinking this might not be worth it. So I started looking at it closer and just stepped back and go, well, is there a better way? And the better way is this. It occurred to me that if I put a blank slot in the materials and label it per character, how is scrolling to that character's list of materials any slower than scrolling up to this material and then taking all those additional steps, and then again remembering that I need to reverse back out of all of those steps? My conclusion was you're trading, it's just a zero-sum game, if not worse than that. It's like again, changing modes, just those steps, just having to remember, switch the tools, switch the steps. When you're in vertex paint mode, if you jump between the fill tool and the brush, then it remembers the material. So you're always having to remember to switch back. And by the way, parenthetically, Blender 2.93 is very, very buggy in this particular regard, and it's the only thing I found in 2.93 that is buggy. But what it is that when you switch these tools, you can switch the color, and it just happened right in front of your face, right there. There it was. You click on here, and it doesn't actually change, and you wind up having to click it multiple times. Now it thinks it wants to sample the color, maybe. I'm not sure what it's even doing. So bottom line is, I guess you need to be in the mode, but the bottom line is it is buggy. I've had at least 100 times where I go to click and add a color after doing this, and I click and it fills, and it's actually the wrong color because you needed to kind of click away and then back. It's buggy. That's not the reason for the decision, though. The reason for the decision is the multiplicity of steps and the requirement of switching back out of all that mode when you're done. What I've found is it's basically punitive. It's not worth it. The better path appears to be just, okay, yeah, it's a really long list of materials, but it's a one-time cost to scroll to that character's list of materials. And doing it that way, having done this particular shot in that manner, I can confirm, yeah, this is kind of a lot smoother. Plus, we get the benefit of procedural, materials, of course. So there's that to consider. Ignore me for a moment as I do something in my browser where I need to forward a notification to a client. Has nothing to do with animation or any of that. But, okay, so, anyway, sorry if I led anybody down the primrose path. My opinion at this point, in fact, I'm going to even go a step further. This is a little radical, and I'm not making any pronouncements here, but I will tell you based on what I've been thinking. Fiddling around on my laptop, and particularly on my underpowered laptop. I have a laptop that's like, God, it's got to be 8-10 years old. And at the time, it was a $300 laptop. It was the cheapest laptop they had at Best Buy like 10 years ago. Okay. And that laptop remains to this day, by far, the best battery life of any laptop I've ever owned. It's a Lenovo, for what that's worth. On the other hand, it's got some very severe bugs that caused it to act funky with Windows 8 back in the day. Whenever it would hibernate or go into sleep mode or whatever you want to call it, it would lock up and not reboot, and it was a mess, which is why I run Linux on it today. But anyway, that laptop, when I run that laptop, the performative difference between Blender 2.93, which is kind of my main version, and 2.81 is palpable, especially when you're doing the things where palpable matters, like drawing, where you're loosely just sketching and kind of moving fast, When I look at the totality of the plugins, the effects, all the different things one can do in one version or another, I can see some very good workflow reasons why downgrading to 2.81a would not harm my workflow at all. For other people it might, because you're kissing a lot of things goodbye, such as vertex paint mode and such as the early version of geometry nodes. Okay, but see, the thing is, when you're thinking about performance, or you're thinking about workflow, or what the ideas that you want to dive in, you want to freaking do this thing. You want to look at what's got to be done today and be able to just do it. You don't want to have to think too much. You don't want to Like every time you have to go to the bathroom, you don't want to have to walk 2 miles to the outhouse, right? On the other hand, you don't just want to wet your pants either. Okay, right? So there's a middle ground, and the middle ground is the bathroom is 20 feet away in your own house, right? So it's a crazy metaphor, but the point is, all these workflow things are like that. You're constantly bumping into things where you go, God, you know, if I tried it this way, would this be better? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. All in all, Blender 2.93 does remain, for me, the best version overall. But for me, the Vertex Paint has proven to be a primrose path that has not lived up to its promise. It's actually become more harmful than helpful to the workflow, and the solution is just create a big list of materials, the very thing I initially was trying to avoid. But then this is where I'm kind of happy for the way Blender works. The ability to click this button and it does not create a material, it merely creates a slot, actually turns out to be a benefit, because you can create a slot and then create a material that doesn't have a stroke or a fill. That way it doesn't have an icon beside it. And then you just give it a label, and then that becomes the demarcation between characters. And for me, that looks like a better way to work. For what it's worth, I'm combining my experience working on this cartoon also with another commercial project, animation thing that completely unrelated, and I kind of learned the same thing there. It's basically this. With the Vertex Paint, you trade away the procedural material, meaning if I get the whole thing painted and I find out the color purple of Mel's hair wasn't quite the correct color of purple, with a procedural material, I can just change the color and everything in the whole scene updates automatically. And with Vertex Paint, this mode where you're painting but can quickly change colors, you lose that. So the bottom line is, if I'm painting a background or something, which ironically I never do in Blender, I always do that in Krita, but if I was doing it in Blender, then Vertex Paint mode would be useful. Quite useful, because I can quickly change colors. That's kind of nice. Okay. Other than that, once you lay down the paint, you cannot procedurally change it later. You would have to delete the strokes or paint over them, right? So is it a benefit or is it a cost? I'm telling you, my experience over about a month is it's a net cost. And it's kind of substantial, actually, for reasons that don't have to do with just the way it works as far as the Vertex Paint capability. It has more to do with the surrounding workflow of switching modes, you know, scrolling around, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, that's the story. I'm going to go back to just using regular materials. And I mentioned background painting because I'm making a distinction between procedural materials are wonderful for a cartoon where you are simply filling in flat colors that basically never change. Again, if you're painting a background or you need to have a utility prop in the scene that has 17 different colors, you know, okay, go to Vertex Paint mode, no problem. But in the general case, this seems to be making more sense for me. Okay, so anyway, in this scene, we saw a moment ago, I'll turn on the preview here so I don't have to switch and wind up on the wrong screen all the time. But you see what happened. Little embarrassing moment. So Tobias is surprised. What do you mean you just started? You know, you kind of just gave us the impression you practically live here. And Mel's line is, okay, and I have to look at the script to know what the line is. Okay, what is his line? His line is, waiting tables, that is. Okay, so he says, waiting tables, that is. Okay, so this was fun because after he pulls up the glasses of water, and frankly, that turned this into kind of a money shot. I got to check one thing here real quick before I go any further. I can see some shadows here that are drifting over top that I suspect are an anomaly or a holdover. Let's see, if I turn it off, they are still on, so that's a little strange. Oh, I see what I'm seeing. Never mind. Okay, so word to the wise. What's Dave blathering on about, well, what I'm seeing here is not the shadows or the shadow material. What I'm seeing is that when I was doing the water thing, which would have been in this layer, I just added a secondary fill layer so that I could have some fills that lay over top of the main thing. So that when there's a lot of movement or change from frame to frame, I'm not unnecessarily duplicating all of these other, you know, the hair and whatnot. The hair was filled one time, literally one time. Okay. So there's a couple keyframes there where things change, like with his eyes and stuff. But once you have all of this paint going on with the water, do you really want to be duplicating the hair and skin and all that over and over and over and over again for no good reason? No. So I added a secondary fills layer. Anyway, what we're seeing right now is actually this. It's the onion skins. I turned on the skins because when you're animating, when you're doing straight ahead animation, it kind of helps to, you want to move quick, right? So you want to see what the last frame is and then just keep drawing frames and have it delete whatever was there before. It's kind of like doing lip sync, you know, painting mouths. It's a very forward, just brrr, you just buzz through and do it. So anyway, it looked cool. It came out nice. Waiting tables, I mean. Get it? So that's cool. Question, do we want any kind of secondary animation here associated with, you know, turn of the head, yada, 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 that type of thing? I think not. If I was gonna, I'd probably just do it in Krita. And number two, it's not gonna help much. So I tell you what I'm gonna do. Let's just do it. Let's just do the usual routine. So the usual routine for me would be, let's see, what's my yeah. Okay, so I go to my RAM disk and I just delete whatever's on the RAM disk, because to make life simpler, whenever I render a Blender scene, I just render it to a RAM disk. And the reason I can do that is because, actually, I'm going to change one thing. I don't like that right there. That's a flaw. A flaw in the shadows layer. Anyway, when I come in, after I render from Blender, I always bring this stuff into Krita, because that's where I marry the foreground to the background and whatnot. And shadow material, there it is. And so once you load frames into Krita, this is an important distinction for newbies who might be watching. If you use Krita like I do, when you load animation frames, which is this menu items, import animation frames right here, into a scene, those frames are baked into the Krita file, which means if they get deleted off the RAM drive, it doesn't matter. They're still in the Krita file permanently. So it's not referencing external image files. Just so you know. Okay, so what do we want to do here? I guess I wanted to fix this right here. That's it. That's all I needed. And I think that'll do the trick. We'll get that rendered, bring it into Krita, see what the background situation is, and rock and roll. Anything going on in the chat? Ooh, hey, Amar. Hey, Dave, happy Sunday. Thank you. Switch to vertex color. The reasoning. Yep, the reasoning was more perceptual, I guess you'd say. Hey, Tom. In the sense that I liked the idea of looking at the palette scheme and just being able to select the exact palette for that character. The logic of it, pragmatically speaking, though, is, does this actually save you any time compared to having a demarcation line in your materials with all the characters? So you have to scroll, but you only have to scroll one time when it's time to paint that character. So the the answer is, for those that want to look at my pragmatic, approach to workflow, these two, the palette here and this, they cancel each other out. That's the key. These two cancel each other out. One is not better or worse than the other. You could argue this is better for two reasons. Reason number one is the color has a label. That's a good reason, because it means that I can, at a glance, if there's two colors that are kind of similar, like the shirt and the shirt trim, I instantly know which is which, and I use the correct color. So from that standpoint, this is an improvement over the palettes. The second thing, obviously, is the fact that it's procedural. Meaning, at any point in the future, if I go through and change this color a little bit, that color will update throughout the entire sequence automatically. Okay? The naming benefit is bigger. That's the big one. The procedural thing is kind of winky because generally once you have a character in a cartoon and they have a color scheme, you tend to stick with whatever the color scheme is. Volume check. I'm down again. Is it high or low, buddy? If it's low again, I will pretty well guarantee you. Oh, check, check, check. Yep, it's been screwed up again. Yep. There you go. Fixed. Okay, so I mean that's actually rant worthy. Like, okay, now let's launch into a rant about AI and blah blah blah. The reason I do that, you guys, you gotta understand, everybody's got their strengths and weaknesses. Okay, and everybody has the proclivity to detect patterns. Okay, everyone does. I seem to notice connections maybe more than average. Okay, so I come up with, this is kind of a metaphor for that, and it actually makes sense in my own head. What does that have to do with the volume? Well, to me, the cardinal sin is hubris. The cardinal sin is thinking you're so badass at whatever you do that you can waltz into any situation and you're the guy that knows how to do everything, and I'm going to think for you because you're too stupid. You need me to do it for you. That's what I call hubris. You know, and coming from someone who, when you have a situation like that where they're actually really ignorant and kind of everybody in the room knows it, but they don't think they are, obviously that's the most ridiculous and embarrassing situation of all. Why do I bring that up? Well, because it's very prominent in software, and what happened with my my volume is such an example of that. My opinion is that it's perfectly fine for tools to think for you and help you to cover yourself. Meaning, if you jump on Zoom says, well, we figured out for whatever reason that maybe we should turn your mic volume down. That's fine. But two things are required. Number one, let me know you did it. And number two, put it back when you're done. Okay? The hubris would be, oh no, we know so much about what you're doing. We're helping and enhancing your life so much that we know perfectly well that it's going to make your life so much better if we turn the volume down without telling you. And that's that. You know, and I dramatize it because I see it all over the place in apps and on social media, and you know, it's like a freaking disease. It's a disease, friends, because it basically assumes that people aren't very smart, really. Okay, so in other words, you're so dumb you need me to think for you. And the truth is you might actually need me to think for you. But if I'm going to do that, I need to inform you that I did it, right? Okay, so we have a little bit of an issue here on our point of view. I mean, we're cutting to a tight close-up here. Let me look at this and see if sometimes it's not the software's fault, sometimes it's the user. Well, clearly it is. Clearly it is. And I can guarantee you this. In the last month, 2 or is it 3 times now, I have looked at my volume when you have flagged that it was low. The volume has been at 70% every time. And every time I turned it back up to 100%. What I can tell you for an absolute guarantee, in the last month, 2 things are true. Number 1, the computer has never been rebooted. Number 2, I have never opened up the volume and turned it down. And I guess those are the salient points. So that means someone else is doing it. What I definitely can tell you is in that month, 2 or 3 times, kind of correlating to when the volumes turned out to be down, I did a Zoom call with family. So pretty reasonable conclusion, Zoom is at fault. I can kind of see a picture in my mind, sort of the data set here. It's very limited, but probably that's what happened. So the problem is not Zoom turning the volume down if that's what's appropriate to the Zoom call, although that's debatable. That's not the problem. It's exactly what I was saying about vertex painting. Okay, so Tom, right. And by the way, Tom, I wanted to let you know, I looked at your YouTube channel, and I like your stuff, man. I just want to say, because up until like 2 days ago, I had never heard your voice or gotten a sense of like you interacting other than here in the chat. And I think I get you. I think I understand where you come from as a developer. And even though we've had some conflicts here at different times, I want to say that it's cool, man. You're a good guy and you're a smart guy, and I like that. Anyway, the reason that your comment led to that little blurt right there is that, of course, here's the thing. Let's backtrack to vertex painting. In all circumstances, what I said, by the way, okay, let me start over. Rewind. To Tom's point, there is no scenario really with software where you're finding that a given workflow is biting you in the butt repeatedly. Like, for example, finding out for some reason that my volume is too low. Okay, so to Tom's point, yes, it is always an option to dig deeper on the software, learn what the options are, make changes perhaps in the settings so that maybe the Zoom app will not do what it was doing. So Tom asked a question, but veiled behind the question is the assertion. And the assertion is that, well, you could check the settings there, Dave. And he is correct. When I rant about these things that pretty much boil down to interface, what I'm ranting about is the hubris thing. It's the idea that I shouldn't have to check the settings, for fuck's sake. If the program's going to change underlying settings in my system, it's kind of like an error in software. If you go back to sort of the Unix programming mentalities, if you're going to fail loudly. Okay? If you're going to change something, make it impossible for the user not to notice. Make it impossible for the user to be unaware. The general idea here that pervades development, and I think poisons the minds of developers, is the idea that that we are thinking for you, we are helping you, this is all helpful. And the problem is, they're not wrong. It is helpful. But but the thought process of how you're going to intrude into someone's life and ostensibly enhance it really is usually, like in the general case, is not thought through very well. So they get the beginning of the idea, but they never finish it. And so you wind up with a situation that's arguably worse than what you started with. Now, the vertex paint thing is kind of an example of that. Because as I said, procedural materials and vertex colors, which are not procedural but let you change colors quickly and let you have palettes, both of these are good things. They're both very cool. So my point was that labeling these materials and having a palette to select, those two benefits cancel each other out. So what are you left with? In this particular scenario, you're left with a list of materials and a list of materials. So those cancel each other out. What's left? Well, these have labels. Oh, okay, so right now, this is up by 1 point. And for me, it kind of killed the vertex paint palette thing very quickly, because the selection of the palettes was kind of the whole idea in the first place. So if that's canceled out and doesn't seem to be yielding much benefit, then this is off the table pretty quickly. But that's not the reason I kind of switched back. The reason I switched back is this. Is what I found was that as much as you can train it and you can try to remember and you can write a fucking post-it note and put it on your screen if you want to, there's a lot of ways you can solve this problem, okay? But what I found was, over the course of about a month, just having to switch the tool, the mode, and then switch between these tools. And every time I switch between these tools, I have to check this because this is buggy and often wrong, right? The whole experience meant that for me to go to do something, and the first time I click to say fill a color, draw a line, make a shadow, whatever it is, the first time I click, I immediately realize that there's one step in this chain that I just described that I forgot. And what I found was that's like happening constantly. That's the killer. The killer feature, you know, let's say on the negative side was that it's like there's always one mistake or another, or the bug. It's one or it's, you know, there's 5 little potential hot spots where something could go wrong, and it's like always one of them goes wrong. Not always, but often, right? So, you know, so that's just a decision. And so if anyone else kind of went down the primrose path of using the vertex color mode for palettes, you know, and it's like the most amazing thing and it's really working for you, great. Let us know, you know, because maybe I'm missing something. Okay. So now up here, he's got an out of focus. Yeah, I actually think we need to use this shot. Let's go back to this one. This is going to be, what the heck is this? This is 93H. Okay, cool. So let's do this. Let's not use this. Let's use 93H because number one, the background's already out of focus, and number two, I am pretty sure, if I double check this here, yes, I'm pretty sure we have some room to do this. We can shift this a bit. So it's not exactly the same for Mel's shot. And actually what I'm going to do is shift it a little bit like that, but also stretch it just a bit so I can kind of get that doorway in the background. Okay, so then all of this can be deleted. And what we want to do is import the Melchizidek animation frames, and this shot's all going to be done probably pretty quickly here. You know, I mean, all this stuff, probably at the end of the day, nobody cares much. I mean, this is all just kind of me reporting what I see, and it's probably not that useful. But I certainly have had the proclivity to announce the cool, exciting new way to do things that's going to be amazing, you know, so I'm as guilty as anyone. And then, you know, 2 weeks later, it turns out that was a bad idea. This happens all the time, and it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. So, what do you think? Is that about right? Why are we getting that going on? Let me see. Oh, I see what I did. That's kind of bad. I mean, it's kind of bad. Okay, so what we have is we have a Gaussian blur that was not the blur was applied to the visible part of the screen, so the stuff that was off screen didn't get blurred. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a chance here and just say, well, let's just re-blur it and see what happens. So part of it's going to be blurred more. Can you really notice that? I think not, so we don't care. All right, cool. So only problem being I obviously just created a keyframe inadvertently. So let's see. Not bad, not bad. Is Mel a little too light? And what do you think, gang? Do we want to do the rim light thing? I actually think we do. I think we do. How do we want to do it? Let's try it with a layer style. Let's see if we can remember what we learned a couple weeks ago. I believe it was the inner glow. Let's see what the inner glow does. Okay, so the inner glow. Boy, that's slow. Is it slow? Maybe I'm imagining things. It's not that slow. That's okay. Okay, was it inner glow? Elements. Technique. Let's go with precise and see what that does. I need to look and see if there's an offset though. The size, 21. I don't think I'm using the right effect, because I'm not seeing where I would have been able to. What does range mean, I wonder? Aha, okay, that's interesting. So I don't think it was that. I think it must have been inner shadow. There was something that, yeah, distance, choke, yeah, there we go. Let's try that one. Okay, and so, yeah, so what we do is we change it to white, obviously. We could use linear. We could use lighten. There's a lot of modes we could use. Okay, so then all we have to do is change the angle. We just change the angle to that. Yep, there we go. This is way better. Choke it. Yep, we'll choke it. Let's make the distance a little less. Ooh, I don't like that. Okay. Yeah, I like that better. So size. So that's kind of interesting. Let me just see if we sometimes I'll just move settings to their extremes just to see what they do. Get a feel for what's really going on under the hood. That's not too bad. I'm going to actually make that a little more up. The choke, in this case, I mean, we could turn it down a little bit. But what I'm curious about here is size versus distance. Okay, I see. So that is definitely directional, but it's also definitely trying to do it everywhere. Okay, so I want to probably turn that down so it's quite a bit more gentle. In fact, I'm going to defy all good sense and try overlay mode, since I've sort of, as everyone knows, enamored with overlay mode. Yeah, you know what the problem is, actually? The problem with the rim light thing, doing it this way anyhow, is that it's putting the rim light in here. Okay, so what does that tell us? What that tells us is if you want to use a layer style for a rim light, the way to do it would be probably something like this. Watch and learn, friends. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to copy this layer, and then we're going to make it black. Boop. And we're going to do, we can't do multi-frame because I didn't select the frame. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flatten this layer. Okay. So now having done that, we have, well, it's got to bake down, but now we've got multiple ways to do the rim light thing. One would be we could alpha lock this layer, which means it's only going to show, this layer will only show where it's over top of Mel's character. So there's more than one way to do this here. What we could do here is turn off this lighting effect that we used before. So just to be clear, just to be extra clear, let's go to this layer style and turn it the heck off. We don't want that on. Okay. Now if we turn this off, we know that Mel is a little too bright. Therefore, maybe this will be useful. So now what we'll do is we'll say, unfortunately, we cannot just move this. I mean, I guess we can't even with multi-frame mode. Does this have a multi-frame mode? I don't think it does. Pretty sure it doesn't. Boy, it'd be cool if it did. But anyway, so what we want to do is just add a transform mask. Add a transform mask so that this can be moved. Now we just take this and move it. There we go. Very simple. That's it. And then we just turn it down. So now we get the benefit of the darkening from the other layer, but we also get the benefit of the rim light. Now the caveat, of course, being that some people would say, well, why don't you blur this a little bit? And the answer is, we can. Let's do filter, blur. We'll just do the standard 5-pixel blur in multi-frame mode. So that's going to put the blur on every single one of those keyframes. And I don't believe we need this anymore. And so something strange is going on here because where'd the offset go? Okay, that's a little winky. So we do have a little bit of a blur in there. It's not very much. But yeah, I don't know how how did my offset get turned off? Very strange. But there you go. That's looking pretty good. Let's watch the scene and see if it looks fantastimodo. Something isn't pinned to the timeline, so there we go. There's that. Let's save our work right now. Let's just get that done. Okay, this is going to be 0393J. New folder, 0393J. And 0393-J. Save that. And so now the great flaw, of course, is the number of frames. This should be 8. And how is that set to 39? Oh, I guess that is actually correct. Let's see if that works. Okay, stop. Stop. What's going on here? The transform mask. Okay, you guys saw that. Okay, the transform mask moved. Okay, that's interesting because I never set any animation keyframes on the transform mask. So my assumption would be this is actually a buffer. This is you know, I kind of rant here sometimes about how shoddy the Krita's code surrounding the entire animation timeline, how shoddy that code must be. This, I think, is that. I don't think that transform mask is actually moving. But let's look at the animation curves. Yeah, there's no animation curves at all. So I would assume, anybody that put it this way, if someone was looking over my shoulder and today was the day I'm saying, hey, yeah, I use this animation software, it's called Krita, take a look. This is the day that I would be just pathetically embarrassed at how, oh my God, I'm showing this tool and I get work done with it, but having someone look over my shoulder and see just how sloppy and nasty the program can be at times is a little embarrassing. It's kind of bad. Okay, probably if we flatten this layer, which effectively will bake in the transform mask, oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Isn't that crazy? That is nuts. That is nuts. Well, anyway, I mean, like I said about shoddy. See how shoddy it is, guys. Isn't that terrible? So here we have a transform mask, and and there are no animation curves, so there's no nothing going on that would cause the location of the transformation to change. If I go to frame 12 and move it, like if we get really stupid, that should change it permanently everywhere, which it did. Okay, so now what I'm having to do is compensate for Krita's shoddiness and actually just move the transform mask twice in order to compensate for the fact that it got confused under the hood. And now what it's doing is it's saying, no, on frame 2, even so, no matter what you do, it's only going to hold for the first frame, and then on the second frame, it's going to turn into an offset of what you did in the first frame. Yeah, something going on with caching, Tom says. Okay. Something going on with unspeakably shoddy code. That's what's going on, friends. Unspeakably. And look at that. I add a new transform mask, and without doing anything, Krita sets the transform mask to this position when, in fact, that's not what I did. I didn't do that. It's just sad. It's just truly, I just look at it and go, my God, how do you have something so good that's actually so bad? How do you manage that? How do you screw up that spectacularly? I don't get it, because Krita's an amazing program, but the deficiencies are just... It's like I come on here to get work done, and it's like it never fails. You know, how long did it take? Less than an hour, and I bump into something that's like so just like... If I was looking at someone else doing this, I'd go, dude, are you, like, you deal with that kind of shit, like, every day, dude? Are you serious? Yeah. Switch programs. That would be the advice. Okay, so here's how we're going to solve it for now. It's so stupid. All right, I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to flatten it. Okay, and probably what that means is actually that won't work because I need not the first frame to be correct. I need every other frame to be correct. So it needs to be like this. I can't help it. I can't help it. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not faking. I am not making this up. I'm not performing. It's like, wow. I'm going to save my work. Kill Krita and reopen Krita. This... I'm going, okay, Krita developers, when you release 5.2, and believe me, I saw the announcement on how great it was. Did you ever actually run the program? Because clearly they could not possibly have ever run the program. Or at least, to those who are development savvy out there, put it a different way. What is really clear is they do not have any, I forget the term, it escapes me, but basically you set up a suite of automated function calls and stuff that you apply against the software. So you sort of do this automated process where you try to put the software through all of its paces and do everything that it's got to do. Tom remembers. What's it called, Tom? To find the bugs, man, to find what's maybe not working. This is so bad that it's just a joke, man. And I'm actually super glad that it sucks so bad that it's funny to me. Okay? And it's still doing it. What? God almighty, what you're seeing here is actually impossible. I reran the program. It's a brand new transform mask. This is a new one for me. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Guys, here's how we're going to solve it. And I'm pretty sure this will work. So this is how you, as the developer, as the user, need to think outside of the box. My guess is, if I manually insert a keyframe so that this is in fact an animated transform mask, now that keyframe will probably hold sway. Let's find out. And it looks like it will. Okay, so that's... and it doesn't. I've never... Well, okay, I have an idea. Maybe this is all my fault. Okay, I have an idea. I bet you this is my fault. Okay, if it's my fault, how could that be? The way it would be is that maybe I inadvertently introduced one animated keyframe here. I'll bet you that's it. Yeah. Yep, that's the problem. So it's completely all my fault all along, and all my rants were unjustified because I don't remember doing it, but apparently I did. So we'll turn this on. And okay, so okay, so this is the part where I try to save face by ranting for another half hour about all the other things that Krita's ever done wrong in order to paste over the fact that I'm the idiot in the room. That's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to pretend that this is still, well, yeah, but the program still sucks. No, this is me being an idiot, folks. So let's make no bones about it. Okay, so I apologize. At least I was able to laugh at it while it was happening. Typically, the front-end developer instead of user should be doing the test before release. User error. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the crazy laugh. We could use it somewhere. Yes, test suite. Right. Okay, so anyway, my apologies, guys. It never occurred to me to just see if there was a transform baked into the shadow layer. That's probably what happened. Here's what probably happened. I went to the first frame, grabbed the automation tool, and probably wiggled it a bit. And then I said, well, we want to use a transform mask, and I moved forward. And it's actually the lesson here is a lesson that's been coming up for me a lot. And the lesson is, when in doubt, at all steps of your creative venture, whatever it might be, when in doubt, slow down. Slow down a minimum of 20%. And this is a great example of where this is a rule that I forgot because it hasn't been a rule for me for very long, but it's something I have learned, and whenever I've applied it's really, really helps. I don't know why it is either. There's something about the kind of right brain creative flow, and it's probably why I'm more triggerable in terms of ranting maybe than some people, is because there's something about either the creative flow or maybe it's just my personality where you're always moving just a little bit too fast. So you do tend to make a lot of mistakes. I was talking the other day on the live stream about how I never do anything right the first time. And that's pretty true. That's pretty much true. I almost and you can rant about it and say, well, why is it that we can't seem to take the time to do it right, yet we always seem to be able to find the time to do it over? Because that's true. And it's a really valuable lesson that cuts across the spectrum, because the lesson is, I'm learning not to extol the virtues of speed, but rather just focus on getting it right. And as I've done that, what I found was, and I think this held true through much of February as I was working on the show, is you actually find that your pace of accomplishment is faster. And it's not intuitive. It's not intuitive. By going slower, I get done faster, or I get more done. That doesn't make sense. Actually, it does make sense. Okay, we got one more thing to think about, though, here. Do we care about these anomalies that are resulting from the shift? Let me think about this for just a minute. The reality is that let's do it this way. To mitigate this is what I think you would probably want to do. Well, we already blurred it. So I'm going to look at this in isolation. The question I'm asking right now is this. Just on this one frame, if I clamp this down again, does it help? And it looks like it doesn't. So I think, we could chase down this road, but the truth is it's not very noticeable and it probably doesn't matter. So I think I want to make him a little darker, by the way, but I think I'm going to leave it. Okay, so this is, what did I say, J? I'm going to put this up on the other screen where it's easier to see. So we want J. Dang. Well, at least I got a good laugh out of this situation here today, that's for sure. Let's render that, pop it into the show and see what we get. I think what happens is you cut out time in your animation so much at times, you may forget the steps you took to get there. Since you're not hand drawing every day. I think that is part of it. I think you're right. You're talking about something that has multiple steps, and each step consists of multiple steps. And if you're not doing the same thing day after day after day, you do lose your you just get out of the flow of whatever you're doing and kind of forget how to do it. So, well, it's good to be humbled, I suppose. Okay, let's go. 39 frames here. Let's stick them in at 8 frames per second. You guys can't see this, but I don't want to switch screens because I'll forget to switch back. So I'm going to just put this in the show. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, I know what it is. This is exactly what we had before. What you're seeing here, so this would probably be confusing to people. Like, why do we see this other shadow now on his eyebrows? That's actually the resampling in Vegas, which is basically a simulated slow motion. And it's very bad simulated slow motion, by the way, as well. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, that worked. So we're humming along. I try to summarize key workflows in my notes for that reason. Well, yeah, you're really meticulous, Tom, and I like that. So I come back after a while and can be reminded about what I did. How do I want to put this? I have thought over the last few months about scaling my operation. Assuming the cash flow scenario surrounding animation continues to either grow or be somewhat like it's been. We only have 2 quarters worth of data that's impressive. So from that standpoint, it's a little early to just dive off the deep end, incurring a bunch of expense in exchange for ostensibly being able to produce the show or other shows more quickly, or just basically create more intellectual property. Why do I mention that? Well, what you guys have observed here today is one of the reasons why I have not done that. I don't know that I am yet capable, in terms of my personal habits, to be a good leader, actually. You know, when I've had employees in the past, which I have, I look back on it and go, you know, I just don't think I was a very good leader. I wasn't... the very dynamic that caused me to go off on Krita about the transform mask is one of those weird connections that my brain makes. You say, okay, psychologically, Dave, what went wrong that you jumped to a conclusion that turned out to be wrong? Okay, I ask myself questions like that all the time. And then I ask myself, okay, if that's what you did, then that must be what you do. And if that's what you do, what other areas of life do you do that? And the answer is all of them. Right? That's the true answer, is that you, whatever dysfunctionality I have is simply being revealed. Right? It's just being revealed when I make mistakes. And at a time in life when I'm trying to make interesting progress and also grow, I actually treasure the mistakes. And there's a lot of them. There's a lot of them. But I treasure the mistakes because those mistakes reveal to me who I'm really supposed to be or not supposed to be based on my current skill set. And I have some, you know, I like myself. But I truly do. But I have some pretty substantial deficiencies that make me a little concerned about the idea of getting too involved with other people at this point in my career. If the situation was right, though, I would do it. And I just bring that up because, you know, it's one of those things that comes up. I mean, you look at the thing, you go, okay. I mean, let's not be stupid here. If you've got a certain pace of work and you got this intellectual property, could be if you're a YouTuber, you know, it could be a YouTube channel and you're seeing your subs go up and you're making a little money every month or whatever. Once you know what the model is, of course it's perfectly natural to think, well, I mean, could I scale this? Right? And I don't know that that's necessarily a great thing to do at all. You know, it could be. All right, so what we want to do here is, but how many situations do we have, you know, in America right now that would be better if people didn't assume they're, you know, sort of more capable than they really are? Put it that way. All right, I'm going to insert a blank keyframe here just so we can get the pupils. Actually, insert a keyframe there. I never did add a blink, so let's do an eyebrow. Okay, cool. Now, Okay, so yes, Tom. William's art. I've lost my marbles. For rim, shadow, image inclusion, subsurface, specular, and emission lights done digitally in 2D. It's easier for me to add my flats layer and then stick them based on the layer. Yeah. Right. I think at 1040-ish, Amar made a really great point. So a rim light or a glow or something like that are great examples of what I'm talking about right now. Think of it as two fundamentally different ways to do it. One would be some kind of filter, and one would be to take the very well-established ways of working that go back decades in paint programs and just do what's always worked with layers, like layers and blending modes, you know. What I do find is usually you get a more controllable result if you do it the old school way. You get a more performant situation if you do it the old school way. And this is just a broad observation across the spectrum, is that, especially in Krita specifically, is filters are usually not as performant as... So in other words, if you're going to change color, if you want to darken this, do you do it with a curves tool and a filter mask? Or do you do it with just a layer laid over top of it and alpha locked? You know, it depends. It depends. Especially when you fold in the fact that you're talking about a one-time cost versus a, you know, something that has to be incurred over and over and over again in the tool. Doing things the most old school, simple way possible usually is the better idea in my experience. Okay, so now we would have a jump cut here if we run with this. Brum, bum, bam. Okay, so right at that moment we would have this jump cut. Is that okay? Depends. Let me see what the dialogue is. Okay, so he says waiting tables. Aye, sirs, he's been cleaning toilets before today, but he washed his hands, of course. Okay. Then he turns back to Mel. Oh? So these guys are like, what? Oh my gosh. Yeah, see, yeah, I mean, Well, I'm gonna share one little insight here for you guys to ponder on your own. Here's the thing. Since the time that I've been doing this show, I have rarely produced the show in sort of what I would call an assembly line mode. Assembly line meaning you storyboard the whole show, then you ink the whole show, then you paint the whole show, right? I've pretty much not done that at all. Now, on the current sequence that does carry us through to the end of the show is really the first time I've done sort of the assembly line thing. What I'm seeing right now is that, and you guys may have some insight or thoughts about this based on your own experience, either in art or in programming. It's all similar. So as I'm pressing forward here, what I'm noticing is this. It's very nice and convenient that all of this ink was done in advance. However, if you do all of that and then it turns out anything at all changes, anything in the story, my observation is, it's a little clunky because you got to introduce some new blank frames and sort of interpolate between them, blah, 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 blah. Generally speaking, it's probably a pretty good thing. But what I've noticed is you do have to keep the script and the storyboard in sync, for one thing, because I do like using a script. And number two, there's something about those ink lines that feels kind of constraining. Like it's a very nebulous thing that maybe, again, it's just a me thing. It's not really a people thing. But this experience in total has been pretty good. But here's the fact of the matter. The fact of the matter is most of the leverage I've got where I've been making progress really quickly has not been because of the assembly line. Not at all. It's been because of going to Vegas and just taking clips and kind of cutting them up and running them in reverse and stuff like that so that I can use material repeatedly without it looking repetitive, right? That's where all the leverage has come from, is over here, basically. Not so much here. So if I was going to advise somebody doing this, I would say write your script, do your storyboard, and give yourself all the flexibility in the world. You can run your storyboard all the way to the end, the pencil test, go. But doing the assembly line thing, once you get past the storyboard, strikes me as probably turning out to be a bad idea. Because you're locking yourself into finished art here that it's all perfectly fine unless something changes. You get an idea of how to play the scene a little better or something like that. So I have to say, through most of the production of this show, I have just worked forward. Guided by a script, of course. And I would have to say, I've been noticing it mostly recently, is that I think that's better for me. I don't know about anybody else, but for me, I think it's better. Okay, so how does that relate to this? Well, he doesn't just say his line of dialogue. I mean, this guy, he's going to say, well, yeah, he's been cleaning toilets before today. Which means that he needs some kind of indication that he's thinking, or right, that his mind is sort of going somewhere. Do you have a moment to look at and connect on a brief clip of the Tahoma2D? Yeah, Tom. What do I do? I mean, is it something you have to post? Well, if you're going to post a link to like a YouTube video, you'd have to put it on the Discord, I guess. But I would say, if your process was made into a Bible for the show from the character design, blah, 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 it would be a guide you can follow, and if they can't follow that, then they could work as part of your crew. If they can't, well, I think you meant to say if they can follow that, then they could. Oh, I see. You said not. Okay. If they can't follow that, then they could not work as part of your. Yes. Well, that's where Ross Payne. The thing that's really amazing about Ross, he may be lurking here, by the way. But the thing that I really like about Ross is if you look at his demo reels from years past, that guy is a chameleon. Like, he does a pretty darn good job of adapting his drawing to whatever the project or requires. And so he's able to wear a lot of hats, or his animation has a lot of different looks to it based on what the project requires. To me, that's pretty cool. That's a neat characteristic. I think a full-on character sheet with acting poses. Well, okay, so what Amar's getting into is this. Would it be better to have a Blender file, let's say, that's called Melchizidek, and in the Blender file is a grease pencil object, or maybe multiple grease pencil objects, with the main front, three-quarter, blah, blah, blah. All the different basic poses, more or less riggable, arms and legs, this sort of thing, that could then be dragged into any other scene at any time and basically save you all the work of ink and paint and everything. And you're just going into doing nuance of expression with eyebrows and, blinks and a little bit of body language. You're not having to do ink and paint. Would that be better if you started the whole show out that way? Probably. Probably it would be a big time saver. Most times they do script, edits, and storyboard animatic all in tandem. Well, I mean, who's they? Maybe somebody does, but I don't know. It's the concept of having a script or the concept of doing a storyboard is really well established. Like, obviously it's like the world has evolved to a certain workflow because lots of trial and error led to that being the workflow that kind of sort of worked. I think this has been to my detriment that leads me to not doing anything. That's just me and my lack of discipline. I don't think it's lack of discipline though, Amar, because here's the thing. You accomplish the full expression of utilizing all of your units of energy that you're allocated every day. You do. In fact, everyone does. I think this is a very important thing to notice. We all get a certain number of units of energy every day, and we spend them all. That's why we have to sleep. So what I've arrived at most recently is an algorithm that I may have mentioned it the other day, but basically this is the algorithm. The algorithm is radar. And what that is rest. Okay, and then once you're rested, if you don't get this right, nothing else works. If you're exhausted, life sucks. That's just the way it is. Okay, so then you would then, what do we actually do? We assess, we look at a situation, we look at the dirty dishes in the sink, we assess the situation. We decide, what are you going to do? And when I say decide, that's a strong word in this usage. You're making a firm resolve that this is what I've decided I am going to do. So it's a decision that relates to action. Then what do? We act. And then what do? Well, you could say we reassess. You could say we respond. You could put it a lot of different ways. But then what you do is you act, and then you kind of notice the result that your action had, and you respond accordingly. So the interesting thing about it is that as a creative person, I talked earlier, obviously, about the 20% rule, which basically just says that whatever you're doing, if you slow down 20%, you will find you make fewer mistakes, and actually the lived experience of it is much more satisfying. Why is that true? I submit that it is true. I think the reason it's true is because our normal pace of functioning is very fast. And the reason it's fast is because, Amar, in the back of your mind, like myself, you have all kinds of narratives going on about what you should do. Now, those narratives may have been initially planted by the egregious abusers of your youth. It could be it could be mom slapping you upside the head and saying straighten up. It could be a lot of things. But the very important thing to notice, though, about that I've recognized most recently, and I think is super important, is you got to realize that those traumas, while they are real, it actually does not take very long for those traumas to turn into a feedback loop where actually you own it. And so the narrative isn't coming from mommy or whoever else abused you in the past. Through most of your life, the narrative is actually coming from you. And the reason, a big reason for it, is this crazy little thing we call comfort. It turns out, and I relate comfort to what are you used to? What has become normalized? What to you is normal? If you've been abused or you've been ridiculed or you've been taught essentially that you're a bad person and you're not worthy, what happens is that narrative, it doesn't even matter if intellectually you reject it. When I was a little kid and people called me diarrhea of the mouth, they were not wrong. I did talk too much. I still do. When I was called, filthy names that I won't repeat, those names weren't appropriate, but the behavior that they were addressing in a very dysfunctional way was actually an accurate assessment. I was acting like a dork, or I was misbehaving. Those are true, right? But what happens is you can reject the labels that people put on you, but the problem is, here's the key, so everybody pay really attention to this. This is very important. If you've been traumatized by labels that hinder your progress as a person, you can intellectually, as a human being, you can say no to those labels and say, I don't believe it, I don't accept it. And everybody arrives at that place. Sometimes it's a little later, like in the teenage years. Sometimes it's a little earlier, when you're like 7 years old or something. Here's the problem. This is the part where everybody pay close attention. Even if you reject it intellectually, if you are surrounded by that type of feedback, this is what happens. This is what happens. It means that no matter what you think, no matter how much you reject the negatives in your life, if you're around them, they have to be affecting you. They have to. Because getting used to something, getting accustomed to a state of affairs is not a choice. That happens no matter what. And so what that means is that we spend much of our entire timeline of life unlearning the things that we were taught very early are normal. Okay? Why do I bring up all of this? Well, there's two places I want to go with it. One, I'll make this brief so that I can get to the other. One is that when you punish yourself by saying, well, I'm lazy, or I don't get things done, or I should do this, or I shouldn't do that, this is all bullshit. This is all 100% nonsense. I want to really emphasize this because I love you, man. That narrative is not coming from your traumatizers. That narrative is not coming from the culture. That narrative is not coming from what you've learned about this tool or this potential career path or that idea. It's not. 100% of it is coming from yourself. And the reason you do this to yourself is because of this. This self-punishment is simply normal for you. And so what you've got to do is you've got to recondition a new state of affairs by getting used to the idea of not punishing yourself. You will not be free of the feelings that go with it for a while, because it does take some practice. But you want to condition yourself to get used to a new state of affairs. So you have to decide what you want to be true about yourself. You want, and I'm talking about judgment. Like if you say, well, I should do this, you're imposing a judgment on yourself. Well, objectively, you're not wrong, in the sense that if what you're saying objectively is, well, if I did do this, I would get this other result. Well, yeah, duh, that's true. That's not the problem. You understand what to do. So obviously, what's going on here is that for some reason, you're not doing it. And the reason you're not doing it is because there are narratives in your head that are punishing you. And in fact, you could be like me. You could be the person that's gripped for years with the curse of lamenting the choice not made. Think about that for a minute. Lamenting the choice not made. I could go left or I could go right. And what is your habituated behavior? Here's what your habituated behavior is, friend. If you turn left, you will take all the energy that should go into navigating the path that's to the left. And instead what you'll do is you'll be on the path to the left, but what you'll actually do is you'll give all of your units of energy to lamenting and worrying and fussing over the fact that you didn't turn right. Well, there's a stage where you think about that or recognize it and you go, oh, well, I can look back at my life and see where I made wrong choices. Not so simple. You know why? Because guess what? If you would have turned right, you would have punished yourself for not having gone left. Guaranteed. Why? Because it never was about going left or right. Ever. It was about you owning the choice. And the fact of the matter is, this is why I'm a bit of a collectivist. It's why I'm progressive. The only person who can make that choice for you is you. But what happens is all of these kinds of things, these negative things, especially like this, are imposed on you. Your brain accepts them not just because you intellectually agree with it. Your brain accepts it because for you it's normal. This ridicule, these sorts of language like, oh, I should do this, I should do that, oh, I shouldn't do that, blah, blah, blah. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. Literally 100% of it is stories you are actually just telling yourself. Nobody else is standing there saying it to you. And in fact, if you have a hard time accepting that, if you're a normal person and you have a hard time accepting it, the reason will probably be because in your mind and in your feelings, you immediately go to the situations where, in fact, there was an external third party that was abusing, manipulating, whatever. I say, you're not wrong. Those things happen and they're very egregious and they should not happen. However, they tend to happen only very, very, very occasionally in life. And that's the thing that's interesting about it. You say, how do you get traumatized when you're, freaking 3 years old or 7 years old or whatever, and yet you spend the rest of your life kind of struggling with it? Why would that happen? Well, it's because you learn that this is normal for you. So what you have to do is overcome yourself. You actually have to overcome yourself. You have to unlearn those lessons that were imposed on you, generally for the convenience of other people. A lot of what gets imposed on you is totally for the convenience of the other person. They do not, by definition, have your best interests at heart, although it can happen, by coincidence, that sometimes what they advise you or tell you does correlate to your best interest. So in other words, the advice I'm giving right now, you should not accept it. Okay? You should not accept what I'm saying here. What you should do, or I say you should do, and you can reject it if you want, and you're perfectly within your rights to do so, is to consider it and see if it works for you. That's it. Because until you own it, it is impotent. So here's the interesting thing about radar that relates to that. I noticed the other day, I was beating myself up a little bit because I basically kind of had a day off and I wasn't making great progress on the show or whatever. Okay? I didn't have a result. I didn't have a result that I could respond to and assess other than the fact that I hadn't gotten anything done. And here's what occurred to me. I said, well, wait a second, Dave. You kind of have this algorithm that says you need to first rest. Everybody needs to rest. You need to store up the units of energy you're going to spend that day. And then what you need to do is assess the situation, decide what the hell you're going to do. And I mean, that's got to be a strong decision. So it's resolute. It's firm. It says, this is what I'm going to do come hell or high water. And then you act. Well, guess what? I noticed I will be beating myself up for that which was not accomplished. Why? Well, wait a minute, Dave. I was well rested in the morning, basically. But did you do this step? Did you go through the assessment? Did you come to a firm decision about what you were going to accomplish before you leaned into it and started working? And then, did you act? And the answer is, well, I didn't act. Obviously, that's what I'm beating myself up for. But the reason I didn't act is because I never decided. And the reason I never decided is because I didn't do the relaxful part, which is just fucking look at it. Just assess. Just look. See what's got to be done today or what you think maybe you'd like to do. And at the end of the day, it's your choice. No one else cares. No one else is keeping score. So if you jump straight from hopping out of bed to punishing, like this would be the extreme. The extreme expression of the algorithm I imposed on myself the other day would be to jump out of bed at 8 o'clock, let's say, or 6 o'clock. I actually got up about 4. So let's say 4 o'clock. You get out of bed at 4 o'clock, and at 4:05, you go into a really depressed state that's going to last the entire day, punishing yourself for all the things you didn't accomplish that day. Now, everybody's going to look at that and go, well, that's ridiculous, isn't it? It's ridiculous because you're jumping straight from here to here and then punishing yourself when you never even tried any of the stuff that gets you there, and you only got up 5 minutes ago. That's ridiculous, right? But in practice, that is actually what we do, and the reason is best illustrated by this. Everything we do results in feedback loops where we are constantly at the most and I believe this is actually true, from the atomic level to the cellular level to the hormonal level. Think about how your body actually works. I think this is important to notice because it really flies in the face of a lot of rigid teachings or rigid ideas that aren't open-minded to the more dynamic way that the world really works, which, by the way, pretty much boils down to evolution. Because evolution isn't necessarily genetic change, although it can be. Evolution is that at some scale that you look at the thing is going through a process of evaluating its environment in whatever way it's capable of doing so, and making choices. Okay, so Michael Levin's sort of unpacking with his research the fact that those choices do in fact seem to be conscious. They seem to actually be, you know, a choice to say this is the path that's going to benefit me. And he's done a really good job of crafting experiments to expose that at the microscopic or cellular level. You know, one-celled organisms or whatever. But I digress, obviously. When you get frightened, think about how fast adrenaline shoots through your body and you go into a different frame. And this all happens really, really quickly. Like the transfer of energy and communication from perception to response is really fast. And your body can go through really rapid changes. So you've got this mechanism going on where there's perception and then there's a response, and in between what happens is there is a very rapid assessment, and then there is the application of a narrative to what the assessment means, and then there's the reaction to that narrative. And by the way, like with radar, it is in fact, when you get to the response step, what you're actually doing is looping back to the assessment. That's what you're really doing, is you're looping back. And it is a feedback loop. So of course my paper or my screen turns into a bunch of black because it turns out it's all one thing. It's all one thing. It's a feedback loop of assessment, action, response, assess, act, respond, assess, act, respond. Now, if you can inject into this signal flow a force that causes the assessment, decision, and action mechanism to be thrown off kilter so that it makes spectacularly bad decisions, think about that. Let's just humor me and assume for a moment that this is actually how our body works, our mind works. Then it suggests that if you're able to impede on this process by introducing a new force that causes the, let's call it the most selfish in a good way, in other words, the assessments you're making are only for you. You could come up with an example where you're making an assessment and a decision that affects a group, obviously. But generally, in 99% of your lived experience, those assessments and decisions are all for you. They're not for anyone else. So if that assessment process can be impinged upon by a narrative that is false, then what you're going to do is you're going to go through the rest of your freaking life making bad decisions. And the choice, by the way, to publicly say, yeah, I should do this or I should do that, the choice to say that is just a choice. It's just a choice. You made the choice. You post it in the chat. But it's your choice. It's not for us. Not for us. It's not for us at all. Truth is, basically no one else cares about what's going on in your life. No one cares about what's going on in my life. We can share ideas and there's going to be overlap. We're going to find some common ground. That's cool. Nothing wrong with that. But even so, basically 99% of your lived experience is all pretty much alone. Point being, you're not doing this for someone else. And yet you are. Why? Because the narrative that's impinged upon your healthy process is filled with falsehoods. And who gets to decide what's true or false for you? Guess who gets to decide what's true or false for you? Only one person. You. You decide. I don't know why I'm drawing circles on the screen. You decide what's true or false for you. And I submit the following. I've said repeatedly You and I are all, we get up in the morning after we're rested, and we have we're allocated, if you will, a certain number of units of energy every single day. It's just like being given a big bag of money, and the catch is you have to spend all the money every day. Okay? You are going to spend it all, no matter what. You cannot not spend it all. That's why you have to sleep. And that's why the rest part of the algorithm is so important. So what maturity is owning yourself, owning your decision. If you're not going to do X, Y, Z, be glad you're not doing X, Y, Z. Because the truth is, this is where it comes back to personal responsibility. The truth is, you can post, I should do this or I should do that. You can do that. It's not true, though. It's not true. The truth is, unless someone puts a gun to your head, basically, you do every single day exactly what you actually want to do. And that's the level that that many people never get to. They never come to understand this. It was your choice. It's all you. You decide what you're going to do. And in fact, you do precisely what you prefer every single day. That means that when you say publicly, I should do this or I should do that, you're performing. You're performing for us. You don't actually believe that. You couldn't. You couldn't possibly believe it. You know why? Because if you actually believed it, you'd be doing it already. And you'd never post the comment, you see. You wouldn't. Because you're comfortable in yourself. You'd say, well, yeah, that's what I should do, and that's why I do it. If you say I should do this, but you're not doing it, it's because you don't actually freaking want to do it. And the thing my hope for anyone who's in that state, believe me, I've lived it, I get it, I understand. My wish for that person is, accept yourself. Just look in the mirror and say, the truth is, I don't want to do this. Sometimes what happens is, when you actually start telling the truth, it sheds the only way I can describe it is, it's like it takes your mind and it sheds your mind and your body of all this performative clutter that you have erected around yourself in order to justify your own existence to others who, by the way, don't love you anyway. Don't give a shit about you really, except to the point that they can extract from you like your employer does. They may be a perfectly nice person, by the way. I'm not impugning on them as a person. I'm saying, but yet, their job is to pay you a certain amount of money and then make sure they extract more value from you than what they pay. I don't actually think that's fundamentally a bad thing necessarily, okay? Because they are taking a risk. They took a risk to hire you and pay you for a while until you find the sweet spot where your productivity and, the role they have you in sort of come together and match up and it all works, you see? But you should stop punishing yourself, Amar specifically. You should stop punishing yourself. You should not. This is my opinion. I say the word should. I hate the word should. So it's hard to actually talk without using the word should. Call it shorthand. Call it shorthand for what I really mean is, in my opinion, as I look at the situation, it seems to me you'd get a better result if you blah, 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 blah. That's what I really mean to say when I say should. When we tell the truth, a lot of things get really clear in life. If you're, like, for example, if you let's say you look at porn routinely and you're ashamed of that, let's say. Some people wouldn't be, but a lot of people would, right? Okay. So let's say you look at porn all the time, and it's something you kind of try to hide from your significant other because you're really afraid if they knew that they would be like really, really freaked out and stuff. Here's the thing. Number one, you'd have a lot less tension in yourself if you were open about it and didn't hide it. Number one. And you will incur a cost for that, by the way. Of course you will. And the cost, could be a lot of things, but you'll incur costs. You always incur costs for being authentic. Always. Some people like you more for it. Some people hate you for it, right? But what you do is you give yourself the reward of getting rid of all that tension of having to worry about it, which chews up energy every day, and trying to hide it, which chews up energy every day. And then what happens is your significant other shocks you by going, you finally tell them the truth. And they go, yeah, like, I already knew that. Or they go, yeah, I mean, that's all right. I mean, I do too sometimes. In both of those scenarios, you look at your life and you go, oh my God, the last 7 years that I've been stressing over this and hiding it, all of that energy, this is the part where you want to get real selfish here. Get real selfish. Look at yourself and go, my God, all of the energy that I invested in stressing and worrying and hiding that was all wasted. It was all down the toilet. Because they never cared in the first place. It was never a problem in the first place. It was all me. Because of my fears. Right? This is stupid. And I mean, admittedly, I'm lucky. I'm lucky because I live with someone who gets all this and really places a really high value on respecting others' autonomy to make their own choices and whatnot, right? And the worst scenario, of course, would be for you would be that person leaves you. But if you think about it logically, you would say, well, wait a second. If in fact I like to look at porn or whatever it is that you want to do that maybe someone else doesn't find to be wonderful, which includes all of your proclivities. It includes what food you like. It includes how you like to celebrate holidays. It includes what kind of job you have. These are all your choices. Well, if someone you're close to is going to find out that if they knew the real you, they don't want anything to do with you, it seems to me that you probably want to find that out as quickly as possible and get them the hell out of your life. Why? Because you're harming yourself and you're harming them. Aren't you? You're putting them in a situation that doesn't foster their happiness because you've deceived them. They don't even know the real you. That you can't really love somebody like that. You can pretend to, you can appear to, but you can't actually. And that's stupid. It's stupid and it's a you're just wasting tons of energy on a bunch of nonsense so that you can continue to be fucking miserable. And if the question is, well, why in the world would you do that? It goes back to everything I said earlier. It's because that's actually just what you're used to doing. It's what your body and your subconscious and your emotions are accustomed to. And we tend to repeat what we're accustomed to. It's a survival mechanism. Your subconscious protects you by making the fundamental assumption that whatever you've done in the past it's kept you alive to date, clearly, right? You're not dead yet. So whatever you did in the past must work. And so your subconscious and your emotions will always push you in the direction of whatever has been done in the past, even if it's profoundly dysfunctional. This is a good thing that has a bad result. And the way that we overcome that is you have to intervene. You have to own yourself. You have to make the decision that, you know what? I don't give a shit about what daddy said. I don't care what the employer says. I don't care what the significant others. I don't care what everybody else's opinion is. It could be that when I own this choice, it'll turn out that I actually agree with them. And that their advice or their idea is pretty good. That's fine. No problem. But don't do it because they said it. Do it because you evaluated what they said and you chose to own it. Because at the end of the day, you cannot escape the fact that you're 100% responsible for every choice you ever made. You can never blame someone else for your choices. And somebody could whine and cry and make a big fuss about that and say, well, yeah, but if somebody's holding a gun to your head, they could kill you. Yes, that's right. They could kill you. And in that scenario, if your choice is, I can live as a slave the rest of my life or I can die, I submit to you by far the better choice is to die. By far. Why keep living miserably? Why be a miserable skunk, that's making yourself miserable and everyone around you probably as well? It's not worth it. So, own your choice, and be proud of it. And then do the best you can with it. Because look, at the end of the day, and this goes back to creativity and all the rest, at the end of the day, guys, here's what we're after as creators. Number one, we want to feel safe and okay in our own skin. Number two, we want to know that it's okay and safe to run with the creative ideas that we have in our own heart and mind that seem to want to come out for whatever reason. Okay? Thirdly, of course, what we also hope and wish is that in doing that and in finding that, we will actually be able to make our avocation into our vocation. Meaning, I'm actually going to get paid enough that I can do this for a living. That would be cool, right? Okay, that's a goal. Well, I think it turns out that if you honor yourself and you're completely authentic to what you most value, what you're most interested in, given, and the caveat being, in a year it could change. In a month it could change. In fact, if you finally fucking gave yourself permission to be who you really are, it could change in a day, because you could go down that road of whatever it is you're interested in, and when you finally give yourself permission to do it, you get a little ways into it and you go, this isn't as great as I thought it was going to be. Turns out that the mythology surrounding it, or the mystique of it, was a lot more interesting than the actual doing of it. And that's wonderful. That's a great thing. You found out that this thing that's been egging you on, that's been, climbed up on your back, nipping at your ears for the last 20 years, has actually been an invisible gremlin that had no power in the first place, but you just gave it your power. It was all you, all along. Because you never gave yourself permission to find out what the truth was. Isn't that crazy? And I firmly believe we do it all the time. And creative people are particularly vulnerable to this. Because I don't know why. I don't know why. It could be that we become creative people, perhaps, to some degree, because of our traumas. I don't know. I think that's probably not the case. From a very young age, I was the kid that could draw, or whatever. Right? So who knows where that comes from? And we're all different. And if everyone was able to safely, meaning in a way that's financially secure and in a way that is emotionally safe, I kind of hate to use that terminology, but safe from ridicule, in other words. You don't want to be safe from advice. You don't want to be safe from instruction. If you can trust the purveyor of that instruction, that's a very beautiful thing. But my emphasis is obviously on everything I've been talking about for the last 20 minutes or whatever, because that's what I experienced in my life. I was ridiculed at a very young age. I was bullied at a very young age. I went through a lot of shit. Now, that all ended at age 16, as far as the, bullying and all. That ended at age 16 because I started pumping iron. I quickly put on 30 pounds, and nobody ever messed with me ever again. Right? Except the one guy who did mess with me, because I was in a car and he didn't know I'd been kind of hitting the bricks, and we go out in the middle of the woods. I'm like, if you want to fight, we're going to fight. And we go out to the middle of the woods, and I take off my shirt, and the guy winds up begging to not fight because he's really scared that I'm going to destroy him. And the interesting thing about that experience was it humbled me, because I realized that if you actually do frighten people or you intimidate people, they're really scared. It's not pretty, and it's not actually fun to put somebody in that position. And later, I wouldn't say that guy and I became friends, but we certainly got along. We certainly had a mutual respect, and were able to function in social situations without, he never gave me any grief again, let's put it that way. Anyway, I don't know how I got on that, but okay, so I'm going to look at that. I'm going to take 1 minute here and just zoom through all these comments. Tom, I've neglected you here, buddy, so let me deal with that right now. Before I look at the comments, I'm going to jump to Tom's Discord comment and look at what he's got going here on the Tahoma thing. So I'm assuming he didn't put it in. Did you put it in the Tahoma2D OpenToonz? Yep, there it is. Okay. And this is a video, and it doesn't look like it's got audio. Is this what you're talking about, Tom? This bit here? I'm not. Okay, so I see. So you. Oh, that's a brilliant. Right. Right. Okay, so Tom is saying in OpenToonz or Tahoma2D, if we had a similar mechanism to the gap fill in the vector layers, that would be a good thing. And what he's saying is the way of implementing that is you're taking a shape that is not closed, and I assume you're searching for the nearest node, the nearest vector node, and invisibly connecting to it so you have the ability to close the shape. Now my question to you would be then, well, in this scenario, actually my question is answered, because I was going to say, is it going to find, it's going to find the nearest node, and that node does not have to be part of the same vector, which is a very good thing. That looks like a pretty good idea, especially because, Tom, I'm assuming this is where it's an improvement on what Blender does, because with Blender, in this case, well, okay, put it this way. In Blender, if you used gap fill based on this vector, this would continue this way, and these would never meet. But you're using a different algorithm that says, let's find the nearest node in the vector shape that potentially could be used as a shape closer. Is that basically correct in terms of my understanding of what you're trying to do? Line extension. Yeah, that's what I usually use when I call gap fill, is line extension. Not nearest proximity, but line extension so filtered in a way. Line extensions instead of radar proximity style. Yeah, all I can say is keep rocking. I mean, it looks like a great idea. It's fascinating how when you solve problems like this, you pretty routinely immediately bump into other problems that you didn't foresee that make it harder than you hoped it would be. So we'll see how that goes. Can demonstrate moving the distance slider. No, you don't need to bother for my sake. I'm very sure I understand exactly what it does. If it's maybe a little more sophisticated than I'm guessing, then what would happen is as I extend the extension slider, it could be that it would snap a blue line to a nearest node, but if I keep extending it, it would say, nope, I guess that's not what you want, and it would jump to a different node that's further away. I suppose could be one possibility. Anyway, I'm going to go back and read these comments then. It's been to my detriment that leads me to not doing anything. It's just my lack of discipline. It may be objectively true that you do have a lack of discipline, right? But the clinical fact of that and the emotional cost of it and how it affects your behavior and attitude about yourself is way out of proportion. That's the problem. To say you're not a very disciplined person, like my dad did that. I mean, when I was a little kid, he said, you know, you're very lazy. He would always be saying, you know, you're always like, you're lazy. You're so lazy. The fact is, I was lazy. He was not wrong. He was completely correct. The problem is that the underlying connotation of condemnation that goes with that was not correct. The fact is, I'm really lazy today. And you know something? I'm really proud of it. Because being lazy causes me to step back from a thing, look at it, and say, okay, I'm not going to assume the conventional wisdom about how to do this is correct, although it may be. And I'm going to say, is there a better way? Is there a more efficient way? Is there a way? Is it possible that this particular enterprise is replete with energy expenditure that is born mainly of tradition? Everybody's always just done it that way, rather than a pragmatic assessment of what's actually effective here. My brain always goes to that. And it's served me well. It's why I don't have to work very hard. Okay? Because on a monthly basis, there are things I have to do, but I've figured out what are the minimum things I need to do to maintain good karma, you know, with clients and whatnot. And I do them. And I do them quickly, and I do them responsibly, and I do them well. It's just that there's not that much that you actually have to do. And in many contexts, that's true. That's why I've always insisted that if people worked a 6-hour day, they would actually be more productive, not less productive, than if they worked an 8-hour day. Because they're better rested. There's a whole host of reasons, and I venture to say that the research supports this view. Anyway, a lot of busy work for many different series for animation projects, which can look at and revise, which is good and bad. Well, it's cool that you're working on other stuff and no deadline. That's a tough one. I think it depends on the person. Some people benefit from giving themselves a hard deadline, and some people get shut down by it. My personal predilection is to generally a deadline's not that helpful because it's just too big and too far away. Like when am I going to finish this show? I really thought I was going to finish this show at the end of March. If you would have asked me January 1st, I'd have said, I think I can get it done by March. I think 3 months, I think I can do it. In fact, I even think maybe I can do it in 2. Okay, and then what happened, similar to your situation, is a third-party project came up that has taken more time, more energy than I would have hoped, and because of that, it has slowed down the pace on the show. So that's my fault. I didn't have to take on this other project. And so I could beat myself up for, it's the end of March now, and I could beat myself up for not having episode 3 done. But how does that help? If it actually helped to do so, then okay, beat yourself up. The problem is it doesn't help. It accomplishes nothing. It's way better to be like Valerie. Her question would be, well, what are the facts? The facts are that it's the end of March and you're not done. That's it. There's no condemnation. There's no labels. There's no nothing. There's just what is reality. This is how autistic people function, and I love it. I love it. I've learned so much from her. What are the facts? The fact of the matter is it's not done. So, okay. If you're going to get it done, I guess you have to keep working on it then, don't you? Whoop-de-doo. It just doesn't matter that much. We all have to own 100% of our own choices. And here's an important point. It could be that there are externalities that have imposed upon you and intruded upon you in life that have been things that were literally situations where you were powerless, and in point of fact, you can justifiably say, this was their fault. It's not my fault. Those situations may in fact exist. All I'm saying is, so the hell what? I will guarantee they represent at best 0.5% of your lived experience, and probably much less than that. 99.5% of everything you ever do has been your own choices. You've decided when you get up in the morning, well, but I have to go to work. Yeah, you don't have to go to work. You can be homeless, actually. Yeah, that sounds like a bad thing, but you actually, it is an available choice. It is an available choice. Is it pleasant? No. But going to work isn't pleasant either, is it? You see what I mean? Any way you slice it, you've got something to complain about. And the whole point here is to shift your thinking so that your basic predilection is toward not complaining. Why? Simply because you want to be as selfish as possible. And it is a perfectly selfish thing to say, I do not want to expend my energy units that I have every day for nothing. Or worse, to expend those units of energy and give them away to my oppressors by allowing them to decide how I think. Because it's them that I'm trying to please. Forgetting all along that they don't give a shit. They don't care. They're not thinking about you. Okay? They're thinking about themselves. So all the energy you give them, it's all wasted. Trust me. It's all wasted. And if you can find anecdotally where a little bit of it isn't wasted, that doesn't change the general rule. The general rule is it's all you. Your choices, you're doing what you want. If you show me, here's what I'm doing, spare me talking about, yeah, but I should do this and I should do that, and I'm not very disciplined. It's all bullshit. Those are all labels, and they're not being imposed by me. They're being imposed by you on yourself. So that's just you choosing to expend your energy and your talk time and your emotions. You're choosing to say, that's what I want to be. And why would you do that? This circles back to the drawing I was putting on the screen a while ago. Why would you do that, a person might ask. I know why you do it. And it's so simple. I'm gonna throw it out there because I think Amar is still here. The question is, if you're doing these dysfunctional behaviors against yourself, my question to you is, we'll see while you've been paying attention, if it is in fact dysfunctional, and if in fact it is mostly a waste of energy, the question is, well then why would you do it? And I know exactly why you do it. Do you know why you do it? Because if you know why you do it, you're on the road to starting to look in the mirror and tell yourself the truth. Why do you do it? I give you 1 minute to answer. It should be very, very simple. I know why you do it, and it applies to all of these things. It's one simple reason why you do it. I'm going to wait 1 minute while I assess the show, and then I'll tell the secret answer. Now the question is, do I even want to use this? Do I want to have that jump cut? If I'm going to do that jump cut, the guy would have to be here. His shoulder would be right here. I don't like the jump cut. Okay, Amar's not answering. He said that so clean software cause those projects to stop, so I know it's all me as an excuse. Real, but an excuse. Well, okay, so I'll indulge that for a moment before I give the real answer here. If you're gonna assert that it's an excuse, then my question is, okay, that's fine, and that's kind of true. That sounds about right. Who exactly is this excuse being offered to? Who are you giving the excuse to? It's not me. It's not Tom doing art, because none of us care enough. We care, but we don't care enough to, we're paying attention to what we do every day. We don't care what you do every day. So why, to myself, exactly. So if you feel you need an excuse, then you should ask yourself, why am I making excuses? That's the same answer as the question I asked a little while ago. I do it because I want to be no, wrong answer. It's not the answer. This is, the correct answer provides the pathway to healing. The pathway to changing this comes from the correct answer. You're giving the surface answer. You're giving the performative answer, because we do performance not just for others. We do it for ourselves too. But why would we do that? In other words, let me give you a hint to what the right answer is. The question isn't, why do you perform? Okay? Now the answer is hidden in this question. The question is, why do you keep performing? Why do you continue to perform today the way you were performing 10 years ago? Why would you do that? The answer is hidden in the question. And the key part is, why would you continue to perform? I'm waiting for the answer. Like the little comic, you don't have, but it did make me feel complete in that area. Well, okay, so I'll sidetrack with you for that for a moment. Yes, it made you feel good and complete in that area at that time, but what that also showed you was that the satisfaction rewards of accomplishing something cool like that, how long did it make you feel complete? This is really important. How long did you feel complete? How long were you buzzing on that high of this thing you completed fucking 7 years ago? How long did the buzz from that happy feeling of completing it last for you? I already know the answer. I'll just tell the answer. The answer is about 5 minutes or maybe an hour, modulated by the number of people you could show it to or tell about it. That extended the satisfaction or the gratification. Your gratification, it's like buying a Lamborghini. It's like the coolest thing in the world for about 5 minutes, and then it's only cool as long as you have more people that you can keep showing it to. And when you run out of friends, or there's nobody else who gives a shit, and they've all, by the way, come to the conclusion that the only thing you care about is showing everyone your fucking Lamborghini. You see? So by being that person, you're actually shaping people's opinions about you to the negative, not the positive. By the way, I would have you notice. And so, if you're chasing after all this self-punishment in these creative areas because you think you need to accomplish something, and I know you are, because you put it in the comment that you should be more disciplined, that's ridiculous. If you were more disciplined, you'd accomplish more. But we just established that if you accomplished more, you would not be happy. You'd only be happy for the moment after you accomplished it. This is insanity. This is no way to live. In other words, if there's going to be joy in what you're accomplishing, it can't be from the accomplishment. So what must the joy come from? If you're going to be a happy person, what must you be happy with? You have to be happy with your moments, with your minutes and your hours. You have to be happy in the doing of it. And if you're not happy in the doing of it, what the hell are you doing it for? And why in the world would you declare that you should do it? That's crazy. That is nuts. You'll never be happy. You'll never be satisfied. All you'll do is be miserable through your whole life, and every 7 years, you might get something done that you can feel good about for half a second and maybe show a few people. That gets you nowhere. In terms of happiness, it gets you nowhere. Okay, so I'm going to answer the question, because so far you've missed the answer. Okay, so I'm going to give you the answer. Okay, I'm going to put it in the comments. It is so important. It's so important. Familiarity. The reason you do these things is because you're used to doing them. Remember, your subconscious, you are not dead. Think about it. You're not dead. So apparently whatever you've been doing your whole life must work. And so your subconscious foundation of all of your memories and all of your emotions are galvanized and embedded in this model that your subconscious has that says that whatever you did yesterday must be the thing that you need to do today. And if what you did yesterday in terms of your higher level mind evaluation of it was basically not worthy of praise, worthy of congratulations, worthy, let's just say worthy. So you're saying, what I did yesterday put me in a state where today I look back on yesterday and go, I'm not worthy because of what I did yesterday didn't accomplish anything. And believe me, dude, I all of this is stuff I've struggled with my whole life. I've only overcome it in the last couple of years, and I'm still learning every day. We do what we did. That's why my life philosophy is so simple. You live what you think. You, especially as far as other people are concerned, you are what you do, and you do what you did. You live what you think, you are what you do, and you do what you did. This explains everything. The first thing you must do is change your thinking. For most people, that means you start by telling the truth. Quit telling all these fucking lies and making up all these stories to excuse yourself from yourself, because it's you who's condemning yourself. It's all you. Recognize it's all you. So, who's in charge here? Your problem, I will guarantee, is that you will not accept and believe that it's really true that you get to decide. You don't really believe that. You're still pandering to voices from the past, and it's an egregious part of the human condition. We learn something, and sometimes the first thing we learn is actually taught to us wrong. And we spend the whole rest of our life having to unlearn, because think about it this way. I can give an illustration of why this is true. It's perfectly natural and makes perfect sense why it's true. Okay, what do you see? You see white, right? Okay. Now what do you see? Okay, well, you see a red mark. Well, that red mark is really easy to see. Why? Because the whole page is blank. There's nothing to see except the red line. Right? Okay, this is how we learn. When you're a child, you're a blank slate. You have no model in your mind of self-image. You have no model in your mind that tells you how the world works. You have nothing. Okay? So if the early messages you get from your authority figures tell you this about yourself, and this happens to be bad, then you absolutely will spend the whole rest of your life trying to unlearn this, because this makes you struggle for no good reason, because the whole reason they told you that was for their own convenience, to control you. This is not necessarily a bad thing. Parents do need to control their children sometimes. They need to provide guidance. right? That's not a bad thing. The problem isn't what the parents are doing, even though it can be egregious. But that's not where the problem comes from. The problem is in the mind of the child, because the mind of the child is this blank slate, and what they learn very early is that this is me, that this is true, this is it. Why? Because there's nothing to compare it to. There's no basis on which to say, well, okay, there's the opinion. Is it right? Children don't have that. Everything you learn first becomes galvanized in your mind and becomes the standard by which you measure everything else going forward. It's why, even at an older age, like 7, 8 years old, you can start to reject abuse. You can say, I don't accept it. I'm not going to believe what they're telling me about, or that type of thing. And it won't change a thing if you're still in the environment, because the environment is what's dictating what you're used to. And you don't have a choice. Getting familiar is not a choice. It's just the way it works. So what you have to do is you have to do to yourself what they did to you. You have to intrude upon this narrative, challenge it, and say, maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe what they told me was wrong. It could be that what they told you was right. When my dad said I was lazy, he was actually correct. I was lazy. He left out one really important detail, which good parents would have noticed this detail and ran with it. He would have said, I noticed you're pretty lazy, but I've also noticed that when you walk out there in the garden, you don't just bend over and weed the garden the way I showed you. You think about can you clear the rows between them really quickly with the hoe first? And that, you really think about it. You think, is there a better way? Dave, that's kind of cool. Yeah, your laziness is actually kind of working for you, dude. See, my dad didn't have the knowledge. You could argue that, the character, whatever. You could argue it a bunch of different ways, but the truth of the matter is, Dad didn't have that in his toolkit. He didn't have it in his toolkit. It simply wasn't there. And so for me to condemn him now is a bit ridiculous. Clinically, I can say that the way he approached it was not the greatest, but I don't want to condemn him for it. He didn't know any better. Just like you don't know any better now. Amar, or whoever's listening, you don't know any better. You only know what you know, and so you have the same problem that the child has. Don't you? It's exactly the same problem. The problem is you have nothing to compare this to right now. You just got a white sheet. Okay? So now if this page, let's just do it this way. If this page consisted of this, okay? Let's just play with this a bit. All right? Okay? Let's put all kinds of noise in there, okay? And then we introduce, shrink this back down. Okay, so now we've got all this multiplicity of information, and now we introduce this. Okay, well, in this context, you can still see it, right? But you do have at least a little basis of other shades of red to compare it with, right? At some point, your conscious mind has to step in and say, you know what? This is my mind, my life, my body. I get to pick. And it's something that you have to take. I have to say, it's something that's prevalent to the American cultural experience today, particularly vis-a-vis women's bodies and stuff like that, and medical care and blah, 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 blah. Hate to go in that direction, but it's true. If you're going to have autonomy, it must be taken. The choice in everyone's life to own themselves is a very specific, discrete choice at some point that they have to make. Now, you can drift back away from it and relearn it 100 times, right? There's a gray area to it. But basically, you either are a person that's taken authority of yourself or you're not. Because if you don't, I will guarantee you there are people willing and ready, usually in the form of employers or abusive partners or whatever, that are very happy to extract all the value from you that's available, right? If you don't want to extract it for yourself, that's your choice. By the way, it's a legitimate and common choice. It's a little sad, in my opinion, because guess what it means? It means that in the mindset that you currently live by, you will never achieve your potential. You will never be the person you have. You've got this picture in your mind of what you could be, and you kind of talk about it, you kind of know about it, I'm telling you right now, you'll never be that, ever. You know why? Because you're not living for you. You're living for everybody, like literally everybody else. Right now, your mindset is that everyone else's opinion is more important than mine. Everybody else's ideas are more important than mine. Everybody else. I'm nothing. Somebody did that to you. Somebody taught you that. But it's just a lesson they taught you. And by the way, it's wrong. So, until you come to the place where you have the courage and the resolve to say, you know what? I'm no longer going to accept that narrative about myself ever again. Period. Those people, they may have been well-intentioned in many cases, but they were wrong. And in fact, some aspects of what they said may have been right, objectively speaking, but I don't like it. I don't like it. It's not my preference. So by God, I'm going to start living for me, because my philosophy is this. If I live for me, and I'm the best me that I can be, and I honor me first, that's actually the pathway through which I bless the world. Because guess what? No one else in the history of the world can be me. Nobody can ever be me. Nobody can ever think the way I think, do what I do. No way. And so if I don't authentically go with what I truly am, I am not only cheating myself, and believe me, I am, because I'm abdicating my entire life away to misery. I'm trading my whole life for misery in exchange for the dividend of thinking that I have pleased a person who doesn't even exist, because they only exist in my mind. What the hell kind of trade is that? That's crazy. And yet we do it all the time. You say, well, why do we do it? We do it culturally for the same reason. We do it because we're used to it. Because this is how many of our parents behave. This is how our culture has developed in the industrial age. Why? Because as a culture, the entire purpose of raising children is to breed workers, working in the factory, extracting value and resources for everybody except themselves. That's what the capitalist culture is. Does that mean the capitalist culture is all bad? No. There's great things about the modern age. It's the healthiest, safest. It is actually the healthiest, safest time in which ever to live. And yet it's still got a lot of problems. You have to own yourself. You have to say, I don't care what the cultural trend or custom is. I don't care what those people said to me. I'm going to decide, and I give myself permission to make mistakes. I give myself permission to change my mind. Guess what? This is back to Amar. Guess what, Amar? You get to make as many mistakes as possible. This is what I would tell you. If I'm going to hire you, I'm going to give you 50 grand so you can survive the next couple of years. You know, you're going to be squeezing it for sure, but you'll survive. So I'm going to give you 50 grand and say, all right, I'm going to put you to work, and here's the whole key. You can make as many mistakes as you want. You can do anything you want. You get to pick. You can change your mind as often as you want. Okay? There's only one requirement, and the requirement is that you honor yourself. That's the requirement. You have to chase after whatever's most meaningful to you. And it doesn't matter what other people think is meaningful. It doesn't matter that everybody says, well, AI is going to take over the world, and so you need to learn this, you need to know that, you need to develop this, you need to buy that. Fuck it all. Fuck all. All of it. It's all BS. It's all stories. People are telling you to either extract from you or to get your attention, because maybe it gives them some views on their YouTube channel and they make a couple pennies that month from you. Okay? All of that, it's not that it's malevolent. It is not that it's malevolent manipulation, but it is manipulation. So, okay, whether it's intentional or malevolent, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's intentional or malevolent. Does not matter a whit. Why? Because it's your lived experience. All that matters is how it affects you. Get it? So if you give yourself permission, and only, by the way, can you do this, I'm not going to pay you $50,000 a year to learn this. If you can give yourself permission to do whatever the hell you think is cool, and you can make as many mistakes as you want, and you can change your mind as often as you want, and your system can unfold, and you can even get a ways into it and decide, you know what, it turns out I really didn't want this after all anyway. It's too hard, or it's not actually that fun, or I don't believe in the original idea like I thought I did. All perfectly fine. 100% fair game. As long as you honor yourself. And the only way you can honor yourself is you have to kind of look in the mirror and sit and think for a bit and really ask yourself, what are the things I really want to do? What do I really want to create? Because whatever that is, for quite some period of time, you've been telling yourself that that's not okay. Oh, you could give the argument in Discord or here in the chat. You could give the argument why it's a good idea. You could tell everyone else why it's a good idea. You could tell everyone else what's cool about it. But you won't give yourself permission to actually do it. Because in your heart of hearts and in your emotions, you don't actually believe it's okay. Until that changes, you won't change. Because what you're going to do tomorrow is going to be what you did today. Remember, 3 rules of life, guys. This is very important. 3 rules. 3 rules. I'm going to reiterate them here, even for those who already know what they are. You live what you think. I believe that a person needs to sit down and really ponder this. You live what you think. In other words, what you're going to remember tomorrow as having been your lived experience from yesterday is, in fact, what you were thinking. It isn't what you experienced, because what you experience has to go through the processing of your brain. And all the prejudices and bad information and habit, mostly habit, that goes into your thinking affects how you process what you experience, and it turns out that it's actually what you were thinking through yesterday that determined what the lived experience of it was. Therefore, you live what you think. Number 2, you are what you do. I can't claim to be a knowledgeable animator if I don't animate. I'm not even equipped to have. In fact, my frustration in the cultural conversation would be the opposite. And I know this is egotistical, and it's kind of I'm embarrassed to admit it, but the truth is that I actually don't get much respect because nobody's really aware of what I'm doing, and I happen to know for a fact that what I'm doing is actually amazing. It really is. How many people in the history of the world, or in the history of television, have created an entire animated cartoon all by themselves? You know, all the writing, all the animation, all the voices except a couple girls, all the music, everything. Me. And no one even knows it. And by the way, if somebody went out and watched the show, they still wouldn't know it. I mean, they might notice in the credits there's really only one person listed in the credits, but they're not going to think about it, right? But you are what you do. Just accept it. Get over it. And then, and if you accept it, and you realize, especially in regard to other people's assessments of you, as far as they're concerned, this is definitely the whole story. They don't care what you think about it. They don't care the story you tell or the excuses you make. All they know is they look at, what did you do? That's it. Full stop. People don't want to think that hard about your life, do they? Just like you don't want to think that hard about someone else's. You're not going to change and fix the world. You're doing your thing, and that's okay. So rule number 3 is, if you're with me so far, you're going to ask, well, yeah, but why do I do what I do? And the answer is simple. It's so simple. You do what you did. Just what are you used to? That's like the whole freaking story, man. You change the test from the animation Truman Show to the Gospel of Life or church. Well, yeah, thanks, Amar. That's nice. But if you accept it, take a screenshot right now, because this is literally the 3-beat entire philosophy of life. Like, this is the whole thing, because everything else that I've said today flows out of this simple sequence. So there you go. Take a screenshot. You can go back and look at it later, whatever. But it's really important because I want you to be happy. And I know you're not going to be happy until you own yourself. Until you do what you want to do for your own reasons, come hell or high water, the rest of the world can go fly a kite. And if you change your mind 15 times and you change your workflow 100 times, and you also get almost to the end of the road and decide, I don't care, I quit, I'm not going to do it after all. That's all perfectly okay. Everything's okay as long as there's only one rule, and the rule is you have to honor yourself. You have to chase the thing that you actually care about. What you'll find is when you finally give yourself permission to do that and tell the truth, you'll find that you're excited to do it. Your energy wants to do that. You, by the way, as a specific example of a person, might be like me in the sense that you may, like, I have an inner conflict that sometimes I really think I love coding and writing software more than I love art and, creative media and all the rest, even music and stuff. It's kind of weird. I have a very profound affinity for the engineering process and the mechanics of writing code. Who knows why, but I do. And so if you really get honest with yourself, in other words, what's my point in that? And by the way, I have to go here in like 1 minute. The point in that is that when you do a proper self-analysis and really make the firm decision to honor yourself and love yourself, you might find out you're not actually that interested in cartoons at all. You really might. It just depends. And you might find out you love it more than anything. You just don't know. But the only person who gets to decide is you. So with that, I got to split. I hope this has been useful, guys. I try. I didn't get much done on the show here, but this is important, and it's good. I'm not going to delete this live stream. Sometimes if I ramble too much about other things than animation, I just delete the live stream. I'm going to keep this one because I think it covered all the bases, and I may change the title or something because it really covers everything in terms of the emotional struggles that creative people suffer from, where they come from, how they manifest, and how you can overcome them. And by the way, I don't have this mastered. I think I have the understanding of it mastered, but I don't have the practice of it mastered. It takes practice, and there will be setbacks, and it takes time because you are evolving. You've got to retrain your subconscious to see these better habits and viewpoints as normal. You have to get used to them. The good news is the first step is that you don't have to be disciplined and change your life or change your behavior. All you have to do is think about it. I'm very serious about this. All you have to do is think about it. Why? Because you're starting to condition your subconscious to get used to the idea of it. And getting used to the idea of it helps you to get to the action step. So just allow yourself to luxuriate in the idea of being free, in the idea of doing what you truly love the most. That will make it easier. Why? Because of radar, right? Before you make a decision and act, you first do an assessment. Well, that's analogous to what I'm describing here. You say, okay, I'm gonna look in the mirror, I'm gonna tell the truth about what I really want. Well, just think about it. You're doing an assessment. You haven't made the decision yet. Don't be in a hurry. Let it happen in the order it's got to happen. Be patient with yourself. The first step to actually making this change and loving yourself is start to be patient with yourself. Quit condemning yourself all the time. These things take time. They all take time. They all always evolve. Nothing changes quickly. And by the way, this is important to notice. If you buy my theory, then you will accept this. If you make a change in your life that is sufficiently disruptive, that it is really out of sync with what you're used to, probably in most cases the change will not stick. You would do much better to engineer and design a very specific, pre-planned, incremental sequence of changes that are very gentle to give yourself time to phase into being this new person that's, the better version of you that you're aiming for. So anyway, with that, love it. It's good. There may be more later. We'll see. And have a great day, you guys.